Esta é a sua chance de se destacar no mercado com a FAM. Já imaginou fazer a graduação dos seus sonhos em um centro universitário reconhecido com nota máxima no MEC, localizado estrategicamente ao lado do metrô e da CPTM, com uma infraestrutura de mais de 100 laboratórios e com alto índice de empregabilidade? Garanta sua matrícula por apenas R$ 99,00 e pague sua próxima mensalidade somente em março. Inscreva-se em vemprafam.com.br e confira as condições.
Today on CityCast Madison. The U.S. presidential inauguration is coming up this month on January 20th. And what comes next in politics is very much so on the mind of many folks, not just here, but also across the Atlantic. In the run-up to the 2024 presidential election, one of Madison's official sister cities, Freiburg, Germany, had residents who were hungry to know what was happening over here in our swing state of Wisconsin. So the Carl Schurz House German-American Institute tapped two of our local journalists, Cap Times photo director Ruthie Hauge and state government reporter Aaron McGroarty, last year to give them regular updates from our state. The pair joined us to share all about this amazing cross-cultural exchange. It's Tuesday, December 17th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Hi, Ruthie.
Hello. How are you?
I am really good. Great to see you. And hi, Aaron.
Hey.
So, y'all, we have invited you today because you are part of this photo project exhibit at the Carl Schurz House German-American Institute. And there's some really interesting background, and you guys have had some cool experiences, and we just want to eat it up, learn from y'all. Ruthie, tell us, what was this project, and how did it get started?
So I was on vacation with my family in Canada, having my morning coffee in August, and I got an email from Frederica, who is the director at the Carl Schurz House in Freiburg, Germany. Freiburg is Madison's sister city, one of many. And she said, "You've been referred to us by John Nichols and Mary Batari." John Nichols, a local author, Mary, his wife, who has served in all kinds of amazing positions in the city. And they had been there to discuss American politics in the past. So at first I was like, is this real? Is this spam? But then I saw their names and was like, okay, cool. This is legit. They want me to display my photos of the election, my election coverage in their institute in Germany. So they wanted it to be a dynamic exhibit growing each week with new photos that I sent over digitally and they printed. And I pretty much just invited myself to go there to talk about the work and to see the exhibition, which they were very excited that I would even be willing to do that. And so it all came together that way. But I invited Aaron as well.
Made it a party. I want to ask you both this, but, starting with you, Ruthie, what did you think about getting that kind of ask and them having interest in what's going on over here?
It caught me off guard in a good way, though, that, other countries are intrigued by our politics, and especially here in Wisconsin, a swing state being so critical in the election, that they wanted to learn more about it. So it was an honor. I was shocked.
And Aaron, how about you?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely representative of the center stage that American politics plays in the international community. We heard from a number of folks while we were over there about, people who are concerned about, what's going to happen after Inauguration Day. Some people weren't surprised with the election turnout. Other people were. But it definitely, the interest from our German sister city and this institute in what was happening here with the election definitely is representative of kind of the attention that it's getting worldwide.
Yeah, I think I told you guys both this when I learned about this story, but I ran into your editor, John Nichols, just on a walk, and he was walking with this German man named Sebastian. And he's like, yeah, he's here just, trying to witness what's happening for the election. And I remember feeling like, oh, right. This is hugely monumental for the entire world and the outcomes. And we are are that chick, not just for Wisconsin, for the US, but also for countries around the world. And it felt exciting. And so then to hear you guys were doing this, I'm like, yes, even more information. We get to learn more. So you both traveled to our sister city, Freiburg. Ruthie, you just got back. I want to hear more about the exhibit. In terms of the photographs, like what was featured?
So I had different themes each week, starting with kind of setting the scene of what a swing state is, because a lot of the people who would be visiting the Institute maybe are still trying to wrap their head around what the Electoral College is.
Sure. Aren't we all? I mean,
yes. So I started with some photos that I had taken in the past year or so, and then each week was a different theme. So I went on then to compare the rallies of the two major parties, their local rallies in Wisconsin. And that was probably the most eye-opening and interesting part of it for me, because I wasn't photographing those rallies in a way that would lend itself to comparison. But that just kind of happened. For example, at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee in July, it was just a couple days after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump that happened in Pennsylvania, and he was wearing a bandage over his ear. And in solidarity with him, a lot of his supporters put some kind of a bandage or a Post-it or a little American flag patch or something over their ear to be a supporter of his. So then I photographed a Kamala Harris rally in Ripon a couple months later, and a guy has an American flag tucked in his hat, and it's covering his ear. So now I've got a picture of a man with an American flag patch over his ear at a Trump event, and I've got a picture of a man with an American flag over his ear at a Harris event. Didn't know that as I was photographing that would be a thing, but it was.
Yeah.
So those comparisons were the second week. The third week, I moved into the theme Too Much, which was fun to do. It was just the bombardment that we experience in a swing state. The campaign mail we get from both sides, the text messages, the signs everywhere, the commercials, just constant election in our face. My favorite piece from that was taking screenshots of all of the campaign texts my husband had gotten. And
and it filled the exhibit. Yeah.
So I decided to piece it together into the form of a receipt, because they're all asking for money. And it ended up being like 225 feet long, I think, when they printed it out. And so they wrapped it up like a receipt and had it hanging at the exhibit.
That's really clever way to display that. Yeah.
Those are probably my favorite examples. The rest of it was just kind of comparing the star power they both used. And what am I forgetting, Erin? Obviously, Election Day photos.
I would say also kind of the merch comparisons. That's another thing that's very, I think, foreign to other countries, is like how much money goes into American elections. A scholar that I spoke to there referred to it as stratospheric amounts of spending. And I think that's so accurate, because you speak to people over there and they're like, yeah, candidates running for parliament. And she lists out her qualifications. And then that's it. She's not campaigning with Cardi B or it's the amount of political spending and then also the merch, I think. So there were merch tables with like T-shirts and hats and all kinds of stuff at both sides of rallies. And then something that stood out to me were the vehicles. So there was a photo that Ruthie took of this like hot pink truck that said something about childless cat ladies and was like a big Kamala truck. And then, of course, at a Trump rally, there was a big Jeep and had like MAGA all over it. And so people just take their support to like wild levels. And I think the comparison of that was just really fascinating to see side by side. And I think a lot of the people that saw the exhibit in person commented on that also.
And honestly, I mean, can you guys give some sense of just like how much y'all did for this reporting? Because I know you guys were attending rally, like you were there, like doing God's work, basically. Like, I'm so glad to see you today. Like, you made it through.
It was exhausting. I mean, I think it started to pick up with the RNC in July. That was, and we all knew it was coming. It was the looming, start line of the race. And that alone was 6 days, right? Between like packing and getting there and coverage and getting back.
Yeah, we drove out there on Sunday and we came back on
Friday.
So it was 5 days, but it felt much longer.
Well, the packing and the preparation was weeks and weeks because of some of the safety concerns around the RNC. So we were researching bulletproof vests and hats and gas masks and things like that, just to protect ourselves in any situation that could come up. So,
and I imagine, was that something different for folks that you interacted with?
Yeah, a lot of people that heard that when we were visiting in Germany were like, well, what do you mean? Like, obviously there are protests all over the world that, lead to civil unrest. But I think that for the people in the audience there who were hearing kind of our line of thinking behind, wanting to be prepared and wanting to be safe, we have to keep in mind that the RNC happened 2 days after the assassination, or the first assassination attempt, like Ruthie mentioned. And so I was concerned, obviously there were scheduled protests. I wasn't sure if we were going to see counter protesters or, members of militias or anything like that. And so, yeah, I think both of us just decided that we wanted to be as safe as possible. Fortunately, it never came to that, but I was very grateful to have that equipment nevertheless, but it did lead to some really exhausting days of wearing Kevlar in 95 degrees outside with no cloud cover.
Yes. And then from there, it was just nonstop. I mean, towards the end, as I was piecing my photos together, like our behind the scenes photos of what it was like to cover an election for the event at Carl Schurz house, I was realizing the dates on all of my videos from my phone, and all my backstage stuff they were getting closer and closer and closer together. And I'm like, I had no rest. Oh my God, it felt like I had no rest, but I really had no rest. Let's see, the last week of the election, I had RFK in Tulsi Gabbard on Tuesday. Wednesday was the big Kamala rally in Madison with Mumford and Sons and all of them. And then I had to go last minute to Milwaukee Thursday for Bill Clinton, and then the dueling rallies we had in Milwaukee with Kamala at the state fairgrounds and Trump at Pfizer Forum.
The same night,
15 minutes apart from each other.
Tem um momento na carreira que precisamos dar um passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
You guys had so much to cover. And so you had so much to present to folks, over in our sister city. You mentioned, obviously, the main exhibit at the Carl Schurz House, German-American Institute. Did you present in other places as well? I believe, Erin, you've told me about that.
Yeah, so we also presented at an international school. So it's an international boarding school for kids ages 16 to 18. And these are students from close to 100 different countries. And this is part of the United World College system. So there's schools like this all over the world. But they go to Freiburg and they study. And we presented to a government and politics class. And
nice.
So they had so many insightful questions. We were both blown away by these kids. And yeah, they had questions about what it was like to be a journalist. And they had questions about the direction that the federal government's going in. So they kind of put me to the test a little bit.
That's when I was so happy at that point. I mean, I was already happy I invited Erin, but that moment I was like, oh God, I cannot answer most of these kids' questions. These kids are smarter than me in terms of their political science knowledge. I went to art school. So I mean, that is why I invited Erin, not only because she's amazing and she's a great travel buddy, but her knowledge in history and political science and journalism are so much deeper than mine. And she was just Her and I could teach a class there.
Yeah. Well, you guys are a dream team. I mean, and you've got the photographs and you described some of them. They sound like incredible. And then to be able to dive deep into our systems, I am like genuinely so fascinated and curious about just the perceptions of us and the sort of exactly what you said, the questions that you were getting and how folks over there were processing our 2024 US election. Like, because as you mentioned, like our political campaigns sound like they're so different. Like, could you have some examples? Like, obviously you were talking about the kids, like any questions the kids were asking you, but also, you know, folks who responded at the exhibit over at the Institute?
Yeah, I mean, some of the questions, like I mentioned, the kids were in a politics and government class, so they were studying this stuff. And beyond just asking about like the processes that we went through as journalists, they also were asking like, what direction do you think the U.S. Supreme Court's going in? And like bringing up specific rulings, like they clearly, you know, were very good at what they were studying. And I did my best to answer it. And I feel very fortunate that, you know, in addition to covering politics, I used to study political science because it's like otherwise I wouldn't be able to answer some of these questions. But I think that as far as like the dynamic of presenting with Ruthie, we spent so much time together on the campaign trail that it's very easy to develop like a really close understanding of your colleague. And so both the presentation at the school and then later that day was when we presented at the Institute that evening, we were able to just kind of bounce back and forth between each other throughout the whole presentation. And so anytime that we needed to dive into, you know, the actual details of the photo or the angles or what she had, you know, the curbs that Ruthie had to jump up on to get a picture, you know, and that was like so valuable to have that insight. And then when we needed to get into the details of what a candidate was talking about or any kind of details about the political minutia, you know, I was there to hop in. So it really was, you know, a really special opportunity to kind of bring the work that we had done together to, you know, an audience that was very curious about it.
Yeah, I mean, two American journalists and y'all were trying to communicate, you know, I'm sure there are some similarities, but also communicate across difference. Were there any aspects of our system or the process that folks are just like, I don't get it. I don't understand y'all?
I mean, I think that, like I mentioned, the global community is paying such close attention to what's happening in the United States right now that people are very tuned into what's happening. And even though people here in America might not understand the Electoral College, like they got it. I think they had paid close enough attention to understand that, like, yes, Wisconsin was one of 7 states that was going to decide the election. So we didn't have to go like super into detail with that. But there was one photo that was taken during our presentation where I'm trying to describe the term "Let's go Brandon" to a group of German audience members. And you can see the look of like confusion on my face trying to communicate this to a foreign audience.
And that was after I relayed that question to you. I was like, Erin, explain "Let's go Brandon."
Thanks, Ruthie. Thanks for that.
And did anything surprise y'all, like, in this exchange?
I mean, I think that I was really impressed and honored with the attention that institute is paying to American politics. I mean, the institute itself started, you know, right after World War II and was designed to be kind of a transatlantic partnership in studying democracy. And now it's like largely run, I think, you know, by the German side. And they bring a lot of, you know, American journalists, obviously, and authors and scholars over to talk. But I just think that the work that they do to kind of make sure that people are informed is just really important.
Did anything take you by surprise, Ruthie, and talking to folks about your experiences over here covering the election?
Not so much about talking of the experience, but the biggest shock to me, besides the incredibly intelligent students and their questions, was the way we were treated there was very different than the way journalists are treated here. There were many moments where it felt like we were celebrities, like we were getting celebrity treatment. And we got to meet the mayor at a special event, and he thanked us for representing Madison and even the United States at an event honoring people who died in a bombing during World War II in Freiburg on the 80th anniversary of that day. So that and the sort of fanfare around us speaking seemed foreign to us. We're just Madisonian.
Me?
Right, exactly. Like, I'm just a mom. So that shocked me. And I kind of didn't know what to do with it, to be honest. Because here, a lot of people, I think, don't have an understanding of how much work journalists do, or the threat to our lives that we experience, or the physical and mental exhaustion, the PTSD we acquire from seeing certain situations. It seemed to be a lot more apparent that they had an understanding of that and a respect for it.
Yeah, I mean, Ruthie and I both came down with like basically the flu right after the election. Like simultaneously, I think, as a representation of just like the level of exhaustion that we both had. And, you know, fortunately, we recovered before we had to go and present about it.
Yeah. Your body's like, one more day. And then you're finally relaxed. You're like, okay, great. We're knocking you out.
Yeah.
You're done.
It was at my very last rally, the Harris rally in Milwaukee, on the night of the dueling rallies, Friday before the election, that I'm like, I think my throat is starting to be scratchy. And I was like, oh, no. Nope. We have several days until the election. There is way too much to do. So I panicked and drove out to Mount Horeb to this place called Viva Infusions that I had photographed for a story like a year and a half ago to get an IV of vitamin C. And
yes.
like this immune-boosting cocktail on the day before the election because I'm like, I will not go down.
She did it. I love it. I always like think about it like that's the last step. Like I need an IV. I literally need an IV. Well, I mean, you guys did such incredible work. Of course, we've been following your guys' stories and the photographs here reading the Cap Times. And then this opportunity to be meaningfully embraced and the work, you know, that sounds so beautiful. Something we don't get to talk about a ton on the show is just like having sister cities. And, you know, you had this great meaningful experience with the work, but also did you have any fun? Like, is our sister city of Freiburg cool? Did you have any tell us, give us the deets.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, we had a great time. We went hiking in the Black Forest, and like Ruthie mentioned, we had this just phenomenal experience to be in Freiburg on the 80th anniversary of this bombing. You know, 3,000 civilians were killed in 1944, and the city was remembering that and commemorating that. And the mayor of a French sister city to Freiburg was there, and the mayor of a British sister city to Freiburg was there. And then Ruthie and I were like representing America, no pressure. But we were able to be there and hear from these two men in their 90s who survived that, and were able to talk about their experience. And I always think of journalists as being able to have like a front seat to history when we're like documenting what we see here in the United States and covering politics and covering court rulings, you know, things that will be, theoretically studied decades down the road. But to be able to be over there and witness their history was just incredible. And I was so honored that we were able to be involved in that. And that was a complete surprise. I mean, we got a text from the director of the Institute that day when we were like literally mid-hike, and she was like, hey, the mayor wants to meet you guys. And my first thought was like, oh, we're gonna swing by his office, you know. And then they were like, no, like, you're gonna be at the old city hall that had to be rebuilt after the bombing.
Wow.
But people can't just go in off the street.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you were like guests of honor.
It was really amazing, and it was an honor that I was a little bit, I think, awkward and nervous to be representing. There were a couple moments throughout the trip where I was like, is this real?
Yes, for sure.
I love that for y'all. Well, we're so proud of y'all, and this is so good getting to like hear these details. Wish we could have been like a fly on the wall, but you've literally illustrated it so beautifully for us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's Cap Times photo director Ruthie Hauge and state government reporter Erin McRoarty. If you want to explore Ruthie's photography and more about this story, head to our show notes for a link. That's all for today. here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin, your host. If you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with someone who loves cultural exchange? We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, take good care.